Hi. Welcome to the future of mining. In full disclosure, my safety share today will come any moment, and it is my first day without a moon boot. So I'm going to try really hard in my 4-inch heels to stay stable for the day. Just a real quick one in terms of who I am. Pam Hackett. I lead Proudoot Consulting. Many of you in mining will have heard of us because we're 70 odd years old. In addition, many of you wouldn't, and that's my challenge. So as CEO over the last couple of years, that's really what I've been placed to do, is reinvigorate our name out in the marketplace. But what you may have heard about us is something called the management operating system. Schedule control, short interval control, active management. Those are all terms that came from Proudoot about 70 odd years ago, and we're delighted to tell you that we've moved really far forward from that and are very much into all of those wonderful parts of mining that you need, like working plans and planning the work, but the only way you're going to do it is through people. So we've spent a lot of time really working through the concepts of engagement and how you bring people along. I'm hoping by the end of a chat this morning, you'll get a little bit more comfort around really what that means. In the meantime, just for absolute full disclosure and to produce my evidence, and since we are in a mining event, it's really important that we start with a safety share. Exhibit A. So, 3 points of contact, that would be my learning. And I have no great story, which is embarrassing. It was just missing the last step at my house. I'd gotten home from a flight, like all women, come home, gotten into my pajamas, walked down the stairs and missed the last one, and that was my Friday night. So after much complaints and saying, no, I'm not gonna go to emergency, I went, and 10 days ago experienced a moon boot for the first time in my life, and I am a fan. And the only reason I'm a fan is because I've never gotten through immigration and security so damn fast in my life, and that's it. So on Wednesday, just between us, I may put it back on, and that will be okay. But that was the evidence, and I think I'm doing okay today, so I hope to remain stable. Anyway, so here we are. There's been four Future of Minings now, but 3 locations. EMEA happened a couple of weeks ago, and before that in Australia, and then of course last year we were here in Denver, and before that Sydney. I'm going to give you, I hope, a little bit of insight into some of the stories and conversations that have come out of those events, so that we can all kind of start from a level playing field, but most importantly, move forward. In the interim, 60 industry leaders are going to take to the stage over the course of today and tomorrow. Analyze, adapt, overcome, some of the key phrases that you're going to hear. We're going to talk a lot about social license again. Note the inflection on again. And a responsibility to the planet, your future workforce, and equality in innovation. Innovation, there's a couple of stats that I'll take you through shortly that might be interesting to you and may give a little bit of food for thought on the whole concept. If you can, please do remember to take the opportunity to go to some of the other things than the main stage. So take advantage of the insight stage, quick sound bites of interesting subjects that the guys will take you through for people who may not have come onto the main stage today. And then of course, sorry for the moving, but it just helps my foot. And then of course, the interactive knowledge exchanges. So there's much more to it than just the main stage. But before we start, who's here? First question, who came from not within the United States? Just curious. Cool, very nice. Very nice. And Canada is not within the United States. Do we have many Canadians? Oh, very good, just to make sure. I'm Australian, as you can tell. I joined Proudoot 33 years ago, and my first mining assignment was the wet fill station, do we still call it that, in Mount Isa Mines, far northwestern Queensland, where I became a fan of mining. But just also curious, millennials in the room, any? Very nice, very nice. Okay. And then I'm going to take it that the rest of us are perennials. I love that phrase, perennials. I think it means that you come out every year or something like that. It's a nice way of saying that you're an old person. Okay, so the 3 Future of Mining events in the last year that I've attended. Here's a quick trip around the world. A lot of it, all of it, you know, but just again to get us playing on the same, singing off the same song sheet, if you like. One of the things that we talked about at every single Future of Mining is the industry reputation, its issues with safety, with the environment, and yet everything that sits behind there is powered by mining. We rule the world, and yet, along the way, mining has the power to lift people out of poverty, and we all know that. And yet, we sit with such a crappy reputation. We talked about climate change, regulations versus the moral obligation to act. People have asked, what's the level at which you need to operate, and is there a level? That was some of the conversations. How do we hand the industry over to the next generation while the old generation exits without the industry falling over, particularly given the next generation is not exactly growing up thinking, geez, I want to be a miner. And so there's still those challenges that everyone's been talking about. We talked about shiny objects driving the industry and driving change, the bling of mining. And we talked about the challenges of innovation when capital is constrained and also perceived to be quite risky to give to us. What's interesting when you talk about innovation is the amount of young people, those millennials, who are actually delivering the bucks. This is me on meds, sorry. So it's all those it's all those young people that are actually delivering the bucks. That didn't help at all. What's really interesting, do we have any CTOs in the room? Chief Technology Officers? Thank God, because what I'm about to say is that you guys have the worst impact on shareholder value, apparently. So what that just means is that when innovation is driven by the CTO and not by the people who need it, the people out in the field, the management who understand what's needed, it actually does have a negative impact. And then, of course, there's that sluggish reputation of the industry to not necessarily embrace the diversity side. What's really important here, I think, that we learned last year is that diversity is not just about women, although I am glad to see people like Elizabeth and Michelle around today. I don't know if I can see Michelle yet, but women who have earned the right to be in the positions that they're in because they're smart and they do a great job, and not because of quotas or anything else. But it's also about diversity of thought. So while it would be great to have a room of a gazillion different nationalities and ethnic backgrounds, if everyone went to the same school, that's a problem because you don't get diversity of thought. So we talked about that. And of course, the fact that that recipe of disaster of all those people who are leaving the industry is going to leave a lot of jobs open. Risk came up in London, the lender's risk, people not necessarily wanting to give us money. And of course, a lot of technology suppliers were at the London event, and a lot of really interesting and cool technology that the suppliers to the industry are providing the industry. Who in the room is a supplier, general statement, provider, service provider, upstream, downstream, versus a miner? Suppliers. Great stuff. And then I'm going to assume that all the other hands are in the mining industry proper. Miners, operating mines. Okay, not quite as many as I thought. Okay, so a couple of other things that we've talked about in London: operationalizing digitization. What does it really look like and how does it really happen? So that was a big topic of discussion. And are your operating models actually catching up with the thinking around your digital models? And are you being overtaken by that shiny new thing rather than taking a look at what your industry, what your mine, what your workplace really needs? I kept that up a little longer because I saw the cameras go up. I just want credit. Okay, sustainability, of course, came up. ESG requires new thinking around engagement, transparency, inclusion, sustainability, blah, blah, blah. It's the conversation every meeting. And we all know that it's rising our costs. there is a cost attached to it. So there's some action to be done, not just in making ESG and sustainability a part of the DNA of the business, but in how you manage it so it doesn't cost you so much to do it and to do something that comes naturally. So the conversations have all been around those subjects. Let's switch gears just a little bit. Now we're in times where, let's face it, the world's looking a little bit disrupted. And we're all talking about recessions. We know it's not going to be your dad's recession. It will be different. The rules are changing, and there is no new normal. So it's all about prepare well so that you can perform well, and then making sure that everybody understands, do you really know how to create value? Do your people know how to create value? Do they understand where they sit in creating value? Flat prices, no news there, and we know that prices won't save us. M&A probably won't help either, and we probably won't be able to buy our way into the next advantage. Declining skills, aging minds, safety issues, environment, this was all still the conversation at the future of mining over the last year. So I guess it's time to look through a new lens and look at your business a little bit differently, but ask some questions. Profits, competition, high returns, compounded investment returns, consistent performance. Which way do you look at your mine? Which way do you look at your business? What makes a great mining company? And who's deciding that? Shareholders, stakeholders, leadership, the workforce, community, others? And then, of course, can you survive the next price cycle? Is your business model healthy enough? Does your operating model support it? The two go hand in hand. So the ability to ask all those questions is great, but we're really getting past it. It's really time to come up with a lot more answers, because a lot of those questions are the table stakes. And so what are some of the economics that are also the table stakes leading the business? Return on capital. You want to have growth that is profitable. And I'm not sure why I put benchmark there. It's my least favorite word. What I really want to say there is leading practices. 10 to 12% is the top performer. Free cash flow, financial health, 20, 25%. How do you perform? Return on equity, the profit that you make from your assets, 15% is pretty good. What's yours? Do you know? Do your people know? Do you have action plans against it? Margins, your ability to price to win. 25% is pretty damn good. Do you know what yours are? Do your people know? So here's the real question. Everyone's out there with improvement teams. Lots of people working on those table stakes to get consistent numbers, predictable numbers, so that shareholders and stakeholders are happy. But what's really interesting is those improvements come with different results. If you're working on something that is 1 to 3 years out, or 3 to 5 years out, they generally don't give you the return that you had hoped. Those are the middle ground improvement programs that you're running. What does? The ones that hit immediate, sense of urgency, speed counts when you're trying to do a transformation. So in the first year of what it is that you're out there looking to improve, that will have an impact on those numbers, on those different KPIs that I just ran through, that's where you get your return, not in the midterm projects. That's the research, those are the stats. What's even more interesting though is that when you look much further out, 5 to 10 years, you also get a return that's close to what you'd hoped for. But it's that middle ground that gives you a problem. And all of that is table stakes. All of that is what we need to be good at anyway, regardless of thinking about the future of mining. We need a hell of a lot more concentration on some of the different things that people are thinking about, making structure irrelevant, not caring who's where in the organisation chart, but just all focused on getting the results that we want, whether those are ESG or whether those are profit numbers, stakeholder engagement, you name it. Removing the silos that exist across the mine, across your business, throughout your value chain, cross industry and cross competitor learnings. The great thing about events like this is that you get to sit with all your competition and you can go and talk to them. You can learn. We did an event in New York a couple of weeks ago, 40 private equity partners all sitting around a table, some of them in the same company, and they had never met. And at the end of the evening, what they said is that they'd gotten to hear what the really interesting imperatives are for the other firms. And it gave them two things: either a little bit of, what's the word for it, feeling better, condolences, that we're all in the same boat. And the other part was that they were thinking about different things. So getting that cross intel was interesting, but more important, how they could join forces, what they could do to have an impact that would be different. A little bit like, I remember when the Prime Minister of one of the Latin American countries had asked 3 of the mining houses to come to them with 1 tailings dam, not 3. How do you get in front of that kind of thing? And then how do you push decisions to the front line? How do you bring the front line to the boardroom? Those are all the interesting things we should be talking about. We should also talk about our management models. What are they? Do our leaders hold up the sky so that our people can get on with their jobs? Because that is our job, to remove the barriers that prevent us going into a cycle of talking about the same things year after year after year. And then getting into the nuts and bolts. Does the role of the general mine manager change? How does the leadership role change? Is it more reliant on a team now than one individual? And what does that mean for the business? What does that mean for your structure? How does that make structure irrelevant? And then, do you have an image model? What's your plan? And hopefully it's one that shreds your granddad's image of mining and puts a new one out there, one that is the vibrant, high-tech, people-driven industry that we do, in fact, work within. So we're at a point where we need to have more answers than questions, and we need to come up with those answers. We need to stop talking and do a hell of a lot more action. And here's why I say that. Because we find that we're still working with clients who can't find talent in their towns. They simply can't get a workforce into their mine. It's an age-old problem that we have to solve. Infrastructure. Countries, governments, they're not spending, who will? How do we fix the infrastructure so that we can operate safely, effectively, profitably in our markets? And when your competitors are outperforming you, what does that mean about your innovation model? Some of you have your competitors significantly far out in front of you, so there's some work to be done there. And risk. Will the capital flow to you? A simple question. When we see mining organisations that still have $70 million business cases in their operations, we know there's a great deal of opportunity to ask a lot more questions and to come up with a lot more answers, because that's a huge opportunity for change. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, that's the new normal. So it really is time to move beyond the conversation and get into action around how you survive and thrive in that world. Because you know, when you get your head up, when you raise your head up and look through a different lens, anything's possible. That's really what this week, these 2 days rather, are all about, is to give you that opportunity to look through a different lens. And if our friend Greta was here, she'd be saying the clock's ticking. She'd say, we're running out of time. We really do need to come up with the answers and do a lot more problem solving than we do presenting of the questions. Or if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'd be saying, winter's coming. I think I prefer him. We're at an inflection point. And the people causing it are different. They're not the same faces sitting around the tables. But we need to come up with a solution because the world needs more good miners. We are good for the planet as long as we can come up with the ways of working that will make us good for the planet. We're necessary. All that wonderful new energy, all that wonderful new technology needs us to keep progress going. So, there's lots of us that are still stuck with the table stakes. Use this week, if you're here, to come up with the solutions that you need to move beyond them. Because you really can't sit with the same problems year on year. But the way that we would look at it is that it's a crisis of implementation. It's the one major skill that can help us make change happen and make it rapidly happen. It's a skill that boards and shareholders and buyers are going to be looking for in leadership teams today and into the future. Can these people run the business of today, or can they implement change to run the business of tomorrow? And so implementation, that combination of technical and tactical to get a different result, the result that you set out to achieve, is really a massive skill set, a development program for many of us in any industry today. If you want to implement an idea, if you're coming out of school, if you're coming out of college, if you're working at the front line, or if you're leading a business, your ability to motivate, to influence, and to bring people around the table to get stuff done is really a skill that will get us into the future. A lot of the things that we need to do, digitize, humanize, optimize, engage, enable, energize, mobilize, those are all the outcomes of good implementation skills. But your PE firms are definitely looking for that skill to be able to assess, is this leadership team the team that will take this business into the future? Oprah Winfrey always says, what I know for sure. Something that we know for sure, all of us around the table here, is that that wonderful technology, those bright, shiny new things, can often hide a simple truth, and that's that people make the difference. People implement that technology, they create it, they innovate it, and they get the results from it. So unless you can engage your people in that implementation, then people fail. So it's really time to make sure that we're looking at reality, which is great things happen at the intersection of people and technology. As long as we can bring the two together to get the results that we intended to get, and as long as we all go heads up, we don't spend so much time in our technology that it drives us back to the technology instead of to the people who need to use the information, the data, and the decisions that come from it. So, smart and healthy minds fit for people, reshaping the way work gets done. Some of the messages that I'd like to leave you with and to think about over the coming 48 hours. The future of business is still people. It's a really critical part of going forward, and it's something that we call heads up. I'd ask you all to get in the game and ask you all if you're ready for the future of mining. So on that, thank you very much.